What's going on, everybody? It's the Fantasy Football Almanac back at it with another fantasy football video. Today we are going to be talking about lessons learned, part 2 from week 14 of the NFL season. If you guys want to see part 1, I'll put it up right now, right up here. But today we're going to be talking about the second half of games. Before we get into it, if you guys could, go down and give this video a like. I'm answering every single comment. So if you guys have any questions going into the playoffs this upcoming season, whether it be the winner's bracket or the loser's bracket, please drop them down below and subscribe to the channel. Turn that notification bell on so you don't miss another video. With that, guys, let's hop right into it with the first game. First game I want to talk about is the Baltimore Ravens versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Baltimore ends up taking this 16-14. In this game, Huntley basically did not throw the ball at all, only 12 times, but is out with an injury. And at this point, he is limited in practice as of 21 minutes ago on Tuesday with a concussion. So he might play. We're not 100% sure, but with the new concussion protocol, after Tua going down this season, I would err on the side of caution and say he probably won't play just because they're trying to play it safe as much as possible with concussions. So I would go out and pick up another option if there are any on your waiver wires, or if you need another quarterback after Huntley and Lamar both went down. We see J.K. Dobbins make a pretty commanding comeback, 15 carries, 120 yards, and a touchdown. He looks every bit as good as you would expect at having a 44-yard run to boot and pretty much winning them the game on that drive. I mean, I know it was early on, but it was the only touchdown they had the entire game, so they desperately needed it. And J.K. Dobbins was there to deliver. I'd say J.K. Dobbins might not feel 100% comfortable starting him in playoffs, but if you don't really have a great running back option, someone like a D'Onta Foreman, I would rather start J.K. Dobbins over D'Onta Foreman, especially after a performance like this. Other than that, though, the Ravens really had no success anywhere else. Gus Edwards ran the ball a decent amount of times, 13 carries, which is good to see. But we see Demarcus Robinson not really do much, 7 fantasy points. Deshaun Jackson even getting utilized, 36-year-old Deshaun Jackson, no less, getting utilized. Obviously, not doing much, 36-year-old Deshaun Jackson. Even Mark Andrews was not particularly productive in this game, having 6 targets but only getting 2 receptions, no touchdown. Over on the Steelers side, it wasn't great either. Kenny Pickett out with an injury at pretty much the very start of the game, and he is in concussion protocol as well, so kind of same thing with Huntley. I would veer on the side of he's not going to be playing, and they most likely will be starting Mitch Trubisky. Najee Harris played decently well, but notably he only had 12 carries, which is a little bit concerning from a volume perspective. But I don't really think you have to worry about Najee too much. I mean, if you have him at this point, you're probably riding with him in your flex. If you're somehow made playoffs with taking Najee as high as you did, or maybe you traded for him, you're going to end up playing him, I would assume. Now, the other players that had success in this offense, we had Deontay Johnson, we had George Pickens, and we had Pat Freiermuth. Pat Freiermuth getting into the end zone on 6 targets, which kind of salvaged his fantasy performance. Otherwise, I mean, only 33 yards. You figure he's not doing much. Pickens had his weekly bomb, 3 receptions on 3 targets, 78 yards. He's just one of those guys where he's going to get the deep bombs, but he's not really going to be getting crazy reception, crazy target volume, which if you know that going in is fine, but you can't expect too much from a PPR perspective for George Pickens. And Deontay Johnson was the other dude who performed decently. I mean, you could expect something from Deontay in PPR, but if you're doing standard scoring league, I would veer away from starting Deontay Johnson altogether. Moving on to the next game, though, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Titans. First, I think we got to talk about Trevor Lawrence and the ascension of Trevor Lawrence. Trevor looks really freaking good now. I mean, so far this year, he is the quarterback 8 in fantasy football, which is just actually pretty good. You could trust Trevor Lawrence to at least be a low-end QB1 for you for the rest of season, especially considering the fact that Tennessee does have a pretty good defense. I mean, we saw what they did to Mahomes. Overall, they have a great defense. And for the rest of the season, they're playing Dallas and the Jets, which are 2 pretty tough defenses. But week 17, they play the Houston Texans, who I'm imagining Trevor Lawrence is going to have fun with, toy around with, score a nice 25 fantasy points. And that'll be in your championship week, so you'll feel pretty comfortable about that. Travis Etienne flopped despite getting 17 carries because he hasn't been getting the receiving work, and this has been a trend with Travis Etienne. I mean, 2 of the last 3 games, he hasn't had a single target, which is a little bit concerning. But if you have Etienne, I figure you're probably still going to want to start him. At least I would, realistically. Other than that, I mean, Zay Jones and Christian Kirk both performed decent. I mean, Zay Jones popped off pretty well, it's a touchdown and 77 yards. Christian Kirk, 7 targets, another 45 yards. Both these players, you could at least consider starting. I think Christian Kirk is more of a must-start than Zay Jones, despite Zay Jones playing better for the second half of the season. But both of them, I think, are worthy starts. And then, wow, Evan Ingram went nuts this game. 15 targets, 162 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Crazy game from Evan Ingram. Good for him. Wish he could have done that more on the Giants, but good for him. Wish him the best of luck. I think it definitely is somewhat of a fluky performance. Now he is the tight end 4 in PPR scoring because of it, but considering the fact that he's only had 2 other games with over 10 fantasy points, I would consider this a fluke more than anything. If you really need a desperate start, maybe Evan Ingram's the answer, but wouldn't really rely on it. Over on the Titans side, we see Tannehill do decent. Derrick Henry play pretty well, but no receivers really do anything. The only other person of note was Okonkwo. I mean, maybe he's worth an interesting start, but I really wouldn't want to risk it. I don't think he's really all that. I mean, we see his snap percentage trending upwards just a little bit, which is good. But personally, I wouldn't really want to start him, especially at this point in the season. You probably have the tight end that you could at least sort of trust already. But now moving on to the next game, we got the Chiefs versus the Denver Broncos. We see Mahomes play pretty well, kind of took his foot off the gas just because they were winning so much early on. I mean, the score is much closer than the game actually was for most of the game. But we see Jerick McKinnon get 2 touchdowns, 112 yards receiving on 9 targets. I mean, that one flip, that one, like, I don't even know how to describe it, pass from Patrick Mahomes gave Jerick McKinnon a crazy touchdown. We see even Pacheco get pretty involved, 13 carries, 70 yards. Other than that, Juju Smith-Schuster was really the only person involved in the receiving game. Kelsey wasn't even really all that involved, getting 9 targets, but limited to 9 fantasy points. A little bit concerning. Over on the Denver Broncos side, we see Russ actually have a really good game, which is good to see, I guess, if you're a Russ fan. But if you still have Russ in fantasy and you were starting Russ in fantasy, you're probably not in the playoffs. You're probably in the loser's bracket right now. So I feel pretty bad. We got Marlon Mack actually leading the running back room in scoring, despite only having 3 carries. He did break off a crazy reception. That's why he only has 2 receptions for 62 yards and a touchdown. We see Latavius Murray, the lead in snap share, the lead in percentages. So I assume Latavius Murray is still going to be that lead back, a guy you can trust more than Marlon Mack. But we'll see. And then the real story of the day, Jerry Jeudy getting 30 freaking fantasy points, 3 touchdowns, despite only having 73 yards. Again, 30 fantasy points. Crazy performance from him, especially now the fact that Sutton's out and he might not play again this week. We shall see. But I think Jeudy could at least be worth a start, depending on if this Broncos team can actually start scoring points. Next is the Panthers versus Seahawks, and Panthers actually looked really good, especially to start in this game. Darnold looked decent. I mean, despite the fact that he only had 120 yards. The Panthers mainly dominated in the run game. We see Chuba Hubbard get 14 carries, Rashad Blackshear get involved, and Donta Foreman have 21 carries despite being the least productive of these running backs because the other two both got in the end zone. We see none of the Carolina receivers really getting involved at all. Shi Smith, the leading wide receiver, with 8 points. DJ Moore is questionable with the knee sprain, so we're not exactly sure if he's going to be playing this week. He is day-to-day. I would probably lean towards yes, but at this point, you're probably not going to be starting DJ Moore. He's been pretty much a fantasy liability the entire season. Over on the Seahawks side, we of course see Geno Smith ball yet again. He's looked tremendous this season, which is crazy to say. I never thought I would say it about Geno Smith, but he's looked really good. Found his way onto an NFL team and has produced in his offense. We see Homer not really do too much, which I was a little surprised about because we've seen Ken Walker dominate so much. Obviously not the same level of talent as Ken Walker, but you figure if he's getting the usage, he will at least be fine. Only 9 carries, only 3 targets. Not enough to really sustain a great fantasy performance, especially without a touchdown. We see all 3 of the Seahawks wide receivers perform pretty well. Goodwin, Metcalf, and Lockett, all double-digit fantasy performers, which is exactly what you like to see. Moving on to our next game, the 49ers versus the Buccaneers was a blowout from start to finish. Purdy actually looking pretty good as a quarterback. I'm liking this guy. I'm liking this guy a lot. I hope he continues to do well for his sake. I mean, he seems like a very nice guy. Just realistically, I'm rooting for him. But, I mean, it makes sense he's doing so well. Because, I mean, look at the rest of the people in his offense. Christian McCaffrey scoring 28 fantasy points. Deebo Samuel, an absolute beast. I mean, whenever he gets the ball, he has a positive impact on the field. Ayuk's a good wide receiver, definitely an underrated wide receiver. We also have George Kittle, who's just a super good player. Didn't really perform all that well, but a great run blocker nonetheless. Over on the Bucs side, I don't really want to put too much stock into the whole running back mix between Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White because the Buccaneers were down the entire time. I think Rachaad White is seemingly going to be the starting running back, but it is possible Leonard Fournette comes in and remains with the job for as long as they are in the playoff hunt because he still is a very good pass catcher, still a good running back, and somebody that Tom Brady has trusted throughout the last year and a half. Other than that, though, no wide receiver in double-digit fantasy points for the Buccaneers. Makes sense. When you only score 7 points, it's pretty hard to have a good fantasy performance. Overall, just a very poor showing from the GOAT, the Super Bowl champion of 2 years ago, Tom Brady. Just very, very surprising to see how bad they've been this year. Moving on to our next game, though, we've got the Dolphins versus the Chargers. And this was easily Tua's worst game of the entire season. I mean, at halftime, he was 3 of 16 on completions. That is terrible, especially considering he has Tyreek Hill. He has Jalen Waddle. How can you be as bad as you are? Jeff Wilson going down. He is considered day-to-day. If Jeff Wilson is forced to miss time, Raheem Mostert should be the bell cow back in this offense, I would imagine. I don't think they're giving Savon Ahmed too much work from here on out. The wide receivers, Tyreek Hill performed, obviously with that crazy fumble return for a touchdown. Great to watch, really funny. I looked away for a second because I thought the play was dead. Tyreek didn't think the play was dead. That was ridiculous. Jalen Waddle, all but unproductive in this game. A little unfortunate. And not a single pass catch for a single Dolphins tight end. Over on the Chargers side, despite having under 20 fantasy points, Justin Herbert balled. 367 yards, only 1 touchdown, but he did everything he could to win. He has looked a lot better now that he's had Keenan and Mike Williams back, which obviously makes sense. It's Keenan and Mike Williams, but hopefully he continues on this streak for everyone that has Justin Herbert as their main quarterback. We see Eckler obviously dominates Austin Eckler. What more can you expect? Joshua Kelly, clear backup despite only really coming back from injury 2 games ago. It is clear he is the backup, the total backup. He has this job locked up. So if you want to back up for Austin Eckler for playoffs, this is your guy. Joshua Kelly is your guy. As for the wide receivers, we see Mike Williams get 6 targets, 116 yards, and a touchdown. He looked really, really freaking good. A dominant wide receiver out there. Keenan Allen getting another 14 targets for 92 yards. PPR phenom. Can't go wrong with him. And even Joshua Palmer getting in the mix there. 6 targets, 53 yards. Gerald Everett is still getting the targets that he has been for a while now with 8 targets, but only 28 yards. He really hasn't been targeted as that deep guy since the start of the season, which is a little unfortunate. But Gerald Everett still a fine really bottom of the barrel tight end if you need one. Now for the last game of the week, a game I don't really think anybody enjoyed watching, especially if you're a Cardinals fan. Kyler Murray out for the season now with a torn ACL. It is confirmed as of this morning. I'm sorry if you are a Kyler Murray owner. It definitely hurts everyone. Kyler Murray, out for the season. James Conner looked dominant, though, taking over because he needed to with Kyler Murray out. They weren't really going to feed the offense through Colt McCoy for obvious reasons. And James Conner looked really, really good. DeAndre Hopkins, not good. Honestly, not good at all for DeAndre Hopkins. Despite having 11 targets, he really was not clicking with Colt McCoy. And again, it's Colt McCoy. Same thing with Marquise Brown, finishing with 5 fantasy points. None of these players were really clicking with Colt McCoy for obvious reasons. Again, it's Colt McCoy. But over on the Patriots side, we do see a lot of very interesting things. Mac Jones, despite the Patriots scoring 27 points, finishes with 7 fantasy points. Pierre Strong comes in, 5 carries, 70 yards, and a touchdown to replace Rhamondre Stevenson, who will most likely be out next game. It's an ankle injury, and ankle injuries are pretty pesky. I'm not 100% sure if he's going to play this week, but if not, seems like Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong are the 2 guys you can trust from this offense. Other than that, though, really no wide receiver got it done. Jacoby Myers wasn't playing. So other than that, it was just an amalgamation of just mid to low wide receivers. Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, Tyquan Thornton. None of these guys you're really going to be wanting to start in fantasy. But anyways, guys, that is going to be it for the video. Hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, go give this video a like. Go give this video a comment. I'm answering every single comment. So you guys have any questions, please let me know. And subscribe to the channel. Turn that notification bell on so you don't miss another video. With that, guys, love you all so much. And as always, have a good day, good night, and a good life.